All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for a demo of our brand new CEP calculator. I am so excited to finally get this out into the world, and especially with my colleague Zeta, who you'll see on the screen if you want to wave. We are going to today run through a little bit of why operate CEP given that USDA, or should you apply for CEP given that USDA has extended those waivers to allow all schools to do seamless summer option and provide free meals. And then we're just going to switch right into the demo, and we're going to open the calculator and walk through with test data and show you step by step how we move through the calculator. So questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A so that if you missed something that one of us said in the calculator demo, if you didn't quite understand what the one data point that's required is, and you want clarification on those things, don't wait until the end for the questions, because we want to make sure that you understand how we're moving through the calculator. So please, as they pop up. But bigger questions about how to use the calculator and interpret the results we'll save more towards the end, but there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A in this webinar. And I think the other thing to know is when you're presenting a big file like in a big Excel calculator, sometimes on Zoom you might hear Zeta say something and then see it pop up a couple seconds later. So just bear with us if we are working on our screens. So before I dive in, let me introduce Zeta Riker, who is the former school nutrition director at San Francisco Unified and has been working with us at No Kid Hungry as a national consultant for the last few years. And she has helped us so much on all things from breakfast after the bell to any kind of school meals operations, reaching more kids with school and after school meals. And so I've had the absolute pleasure of working with her for the last couple months on developing a CEP calculator. And this really came from she had been doing this kind of analysis for districts across the country when they would ask, I need some help assessing the impacts financially of adopting or expanding CEP. And they were so good. We were like, why don't we make this into a model and a financial calculator that we can put on the website the last couple months to do that. And it's been a really great partnership, and I'm so excited to work with Zeta and bring it to you. I see we've got a couple technical questions already. I will send the PowerPoint slides out afterwards, and I see one about the calculator not being able to download. So if anyone else has in a moment, but let us know, because we want to make sure you have access to it and I can email it to you if for some reason it's not downloading. So without further ado, I'm actually going to launch a poll here, and this will help us as we're moving through the calculator to know how in depth we need to go about some of the terms. So if you could answer the poll, how familiar are you with CEP? Brand new, know the big, or there's the option, I know some folks on the line don't work in schools but support CEP. So if you would just take a moment to respond to that poll, that'll help us gear this webinar towards your experience levels. All right, I'll close in 3, 2, 1. Thank you. It looks like we're split between experience and brand new, so we're about halfway down the middle. So those of you with experience operating CEP on the line, please do feel free to share in the chat your experiences and ideas you have as we're moving through this, and considerations or recommendations. So thank you all for responding to that. And let's get into some CEP basics. So most of you, I'm sure, know on this call, Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, enables eligible schools to provide breakfast and lunch to all students at no cost to them. So it reduces stigma for participating in the school meals program and thus increases participation in the school meals program. Systemic outcomes among students, including more students advancing beyond the 10th grade and fewer disciplinary referrals. We know that it reduces financial stress for parents, not having to worry about checking their students' lunch accounts and making sure that it has enough for the week. You're eliminating unpaid school meal debt altogether, which means no more having to serve an alternative lunch to kids whose lunch balances are low, no more having to call families and ask them to replenish their school meals account, and no more trying to figure out how to pay for the unpaid school meal debt at the end of the year and cover those costs if you can't get them from families. And we know that that also improves school nutrition staff morale to never have to deal with any of that or have any of those difficult conversations. CEP simplifies counting and claiming. So instead of counting by free, reduced, and paid meal categories, you're doing the total number of, and that often lends itself to some state agencies will allow school districts to do a tally or use a clicker to count meals that have been served. And if you get approved for that, that can be really great at reducing the points of contact among students on pin pads or swiping IDs in a global pandemic. Fewer surfaces for kids to touch and to sanitize is definitely a bonus. And schools or groups of schools must have an identified student percentage or ISP of 40% or more to operate CEP. And the big thing to know off this slide this year is that CEP, when you apply, it's a 4-year cycle. So if you apply this year, even if you're operating SSO, the seamless summer option, which enables out of meal for CEP this year, that means that you can preserve the ability to serve free school meals through school year 24-25. So it's not just going to be this school year. And we have lots of CEP 101 presentations, but we're not going to go into how to calculate the ISP at this point because we really want to switch to the demo. So I will share some resources in the chat once I hand it over to Zeta if you need more of that basics or background. But I just wanted to address quickly the elephant in the room. USDA extended free meals for all this year. Why should I apply for CEP? So applying for CEP now is a no-risk opportunity to lock in your current ISPs, which are likely higher than they've been in the past because of increased program participation in things like SNAP, and is a way to ISPs and the, again, ability to serve free school meals to all through school year 24-25. And it sounds like I'm lagging. I'm seeing the chat. So I'm gonna switch my audio. And if you bear with me for a moment, I'm gonna cut out, but I'm gonna switch to my phone audio. Appreciate you all for your texts and chats.
Thank you for bearing with us, folks, as we have our technical difficulties, but we'll get set up really quick.
All right, is this better? We're good? Okay, thank you all so much. Again, that's going to make for a really pretty 10 minutes at the beginning recording there. So appreciate you stopping me before I went all the way through this. So I'm sure you read what was on the slide and I hope you could hear most of it. But again, a no risk opportunity to lock in your higher ISPs. And If your ISPs do increase next year, great. You can just reapply again and lock in those higher rates. On the flip side, if you don't apply for CEP this year and your ISPs decrease next year, then you'll have missed the opportunity to lock in these potentially higher ISPs you have right now and those peak reimbursement rates. And again, because CEP is a 4-year cycle, you've missed that opportunity for the next couple years if your ISPs continue to decline, which is the most likely scenario given that we expect the economy will continue to improve and families' financial situations will improve. So remember that USDA extended the CEP application deadline to September 30th, which means you have up through June 30th to determine your ISPs using data from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, to look at your identified student percentages, extend eligibility to others in the household, work with your McKinney-Vento liaisons and foster care liaisons to maximize your ISPs, and then use Zeta's calculator to determine whether or not you're going to apply and help you make that decision. And you have until September 30th to do so. If your capacity is limited, please feel free to reach out. We are happy to help. And so I have my email written on my video here, but I'll share it in the chat as well. We are happy to help with financial analyses and using this calculator, with grouping optimization, with connecting you with other CEP districts in the area who may be able to provide some peer-to-peer support. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do. All that said, thank you so much for listening to that garbled presentation. And I'm going to hand it over to Zeta. Again, if you have just recently joined since I introduced Zeta at the top, she is the former nutrition director at San Francisco Unified and a national consultant for us, and she is the mastermind behind this calculator. So thank you so much, and take it away, Zeta.
Thank you, Emily, for the warm welcome. If I'm going to share my screen, but I think you've got to give me access. So I'm very excited to share this with you all. I know that our jobs are all about feeding hungry kids and making sure they have the nutrition to be able to absorb all the great lessons that our teachers provide. But we do have the reality of being fiscally responsible. And so this is hopefully a tool for you and your CBO and any others in your district that are wanting to see the financial impact. So it is an Excel file. So this is what it looks like here on the screen. And it's really meant to be something where you gather your data and then you just copy paste or type your data in and it runs by itself. We do want to share that when the file opens up, it will ask you to allow it to run a macro, and you should say yes. But don't worry, you won't have to run any macros or do any Excel formulas or anything like that. The calculator is built to run all of that in the background for you. Don't worry, you don't have to do any of that. So just select yes when it opens, and then it will come to the first introduction tab here. This is showing the instructions as well as some of the references and the research that we use to build the calculator. And it's a step-by-step guide. So the first step, as I mentioned, you'll gather your data, and we'll go into that in a little bit next. Step 2 is you'll enter your data for your district, and then you'll enter your data by school. From there, you'll click a button and the data will be sent to the Meals Count website to do the grouping, and it will come back and update the spreadsheet automatically. And then from there, you'll dig into the results and start looking and interpreting some of the analysis that the calculator provides. Now, the way that this calculator is laid out, anything that is in yellow, as you'll see the tabs down here, that's where you enter data, or there's something that you need to do, such as push a button. And then the blue tabs down here along the bottom are you're just viewing results. Okay, so moving on to step 1, so gathering your data. So most of the data that the model or calculator uses are standard child nutrition data. So number of eligible free reduced paid students, your number of identified students. And again, if you don't know, for those of you that are new to CEP, there are tons of resources and webinars out there around how to get that, your IS or your identified student number. And really it does make a difference every single child that you can count towards that number. So if you're not familiar with the strategies on how to include or get that number up, I highly recommend you access some of the resources that are available. The next is average daily participation. And this is so a meal count number, so a number of meals. It's not a percentage participation. So for example, it would be something like how many breakfast and free reduced paid breakfast and lunches you're going to serve. So, 10 breakfast, 10 free breakfast, 5 reduced, 50 full pay. So it will be a whole number that you'll be entering. Some of you may be asking, well, how do I get ADP? So you can either take a whole year. I would suggest the year before COVID, or take a time period when you feel like it was a normal operations. So like maybe January of 2020, and take that number, such as your federal claim that comes in, and then divide it by your service days, and that will give you an average daily participation. So it's a daily number. The next data piece is your total unpaid meal charges by school for the year. For those who aren't familiar with meal charges happen when a full pay or paid student comes through the lunch line and does not have money to pay the full pay price, but they do request a meal. So they incur a charge on their account. So at the end of the year, unfortunately, most schools, I think nowadays, have at least some amount of meal charges on the books for the school. So we're looking for that whole number for all the children in that school for the meal charges. And this data point is really important, especially when it comes to CEP, because you could be running your numbers and looking at only the ISP, or your enrollment numbers, and it could look like it's not a really good case for CEP. But if you are basically not collecting any funds, any of the paid meal funds from students, you're not getting that revenue. And so it makes CEP a much more viable option because the meal charges or the local paid price is no longer collected. So it's really important to include that unpaid meal charge amount by school. The next data point is non-severe or severe breakfast. That should be pretty straightforward. You can find that information in your federal claims. Same thing with if you serve more than 60% free reduced lunches, menu certification. These are all the federal nuances of your claiming. If you charge a reduced price, I think a lot of districts nowadays have waived the reduced price copay, but if not, you'll need to have that information, and then your paid meal prices. And that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. So you'll want to gather all of that information by school. And then once you have it, so you'll go to this yellow tab here. You'll put in your district name. We have Anaheim here today because they graciously have agreed to let us share some of their analysis with the team today. So you'll answer these questions here, and then input the paid meal price here as well. And then you'll move to entering in the school data. So the school name here, what level they are, and then the data that I just referenced before. So the free, reduced, paid students, identified students, all of that data goes in here. And then from there, you'll go to the meals count tab. And the only thing that you'll be touching on this tab is this button right here. The data is pre-loaded already from where you entered your data on this tab. And so I'll just do a quick demo. So you just select this button here, and this pop-up box happens, and it says your data is now being sent to meals count. So there's nothing for you to do. Just select OK. For those districts that are larger districts, so maybe over 25 schools, 30 schools, we wanted you to know that it could take up to 5 or even 10 minutes to run the analysis, because the meals count is running probably hundreds of different algorithms and scenarios for what is going to make the most sense in terms of the groupings of schools. So you'll see in this case, it came back pretty quickly. So this pop-up box is saying that the analysis has been completed. And from here, we can move to the results tab. And so here is the district-wide numbers in this case.
Zetta,
And there's, yes.
can I interrupt you for one
Yes.
second? Just some folks are saying it's a little hard to zoom. We tried to zoom in on all the tabs before you're fine, but if you're an attendee and you're having trouble seeing, you can go up to the top of your screen. You'll see you are viewing Zetta Riker's screen, and then view options right to the right of it. If you click view options, you can change the zoom ratio. So right now it's set at fit to window, but if you want to increase it, you can use those percentages to increase what you're seeing, and it'll zoom in on her screen. So then you'll have to take your mouse and kind of drag the screen along so that you can read it. But again, I put the link as well to the CEP calculator in the chat. So if you want to download it at that link, then you can also open the calculator and read it that way. So just wanted to share how to zoom. Back
Yes,
to you,
thank
Zetta.
you, Emily. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of information in the calendar and the calculator. So, okay. So from here, we're viewing the results by district page. And so in this analysis, or in the calculator, there are 4 different scenarios that you'll be viewing. The first one is, what is the current, from the data that you entered, what is the current program revenue based off of standard national school lunch program and the school breakfast program claiming? So what would be the expected revenue under those claiming models? So, standard, so that's almost like your baseline, what we're going to compare the analysis against. So the first scenario that the calculator runs is, what revenue might you expect should you implement CEP at all of the schools for which it is eligible? And so we looked at the research and from other schools that have implemented CEP, what participation rates they experienced. So in a very simple example, if a school had 100 students, they could expect 73 students to participate in lunch and 47 students participate in breakfast. So this is what the research was showing, that the average participation for CEP schools could, or what schools could expect. And so this is the expected revenue based off of those participation rates. The second scenario, or the third scenario, I guess, second scenario, third analysis is scenario 2, and it's looking at CEP when combined with breakfast in the classroom. This is where you really start to see the real power of CEP and the other programs that are available to you, such as breakfast in the classroom. And you can really serve a lot of your high needs students with these two combined. And so this scenario looks at CEP for lunch and then a CEP for breakfast for BIC with breakfast in the classroom with an expected participation rate of 65%. And then this third scenario, we threw this in just as a matter of, really making sure that everyone had a full spectrum of the data. And I know sometimes CBOs also like to see this as well. So this third scenario is looking at if you flipped a switch, if you went back in time and flipped a switch and you applied CEP to the participation rates that you had, what would be the revenue? And there was zero change in participation. Now we know that this is not, I don't think I've ever heard of a school that didn't have any participation change at all. But as a matter of just being thorough, we did want to include this analysis in the calculator. And then the final analysis for those who are looking for even more fine tuning and tweaking and kind of wanting to go above and beyond the first two scenarios that we provided, there is a advanced analysis tab where you can go in and by school, you can adjust the participation rates. And we'll go into that. I'll show that in just a minute. So this page here is the district results tab. So then moving into the next results. So it is the results by school. So you'll see here the schools, it's all pre-populated. So this is the current revenue, your current program revenue based off of standard counting and claiming. And then this is scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. And you'll see the results by school. We did also include, there's the CEP grouping number. If Meals Count did come back with groupings for your schools, I think most of the time it does make sense to group, but that's not always the case. It depends on your district, but we did include that reference there if you wanted to see it. So again, there's nothing on this page that you'll need to edit. It's really just viewing and analysis for you. And then from there, for those who did want to go through and do any tweaking by school, I know that most nutrition staff and school staff know their schools well, and there's little nuances that can really affect what programs are operating there and expected participation rates. So this page here, you can edit the participation rates and then see the impact on the revenue. So for example, we have Anaheim High School. It currently has a participation rate, breakfast participation rate of 16%, a lunch participation of 49%. And so I'm going to say that, we're going to implement CEP and we're going to implement a second chance breakfast in a cart, right at the beginning of the school. And so we expect participation to be around 25%. And then we know that, the school is going to open another lunch period. We're going to add a lunch period. So we're going to take it from 56 to 65%. So you can go ahead and edit in real time those participation numbers. We did also build into the calculator. Again, you wouldn't expect to see a drop in participation from CEP. So you'll see that if for any reason the percentage is lower than your current, it does come up as red. So that's the functionality of the calculator and how it works. Again, these yellow tabs here are where you are entering in your data. On this meals count tab, you're pressing a button and it runs on its own. And then from there, you go into the analysis tabs. I think we wanted to show you, as I mentioned, Anaheim graciously, it's a district in California, graciously allowed us to view their data. It's a pretty large school district. It is a high school district, but they do vend to other elementary and charter schools. So there's about 47 schools in this district, and they do have a really wide range of higher ISP schools and low. They do have some, I think even there's one that's 20% ISP. So this is where the power of grouping really comes into play here, because you can really, there's a lot of ways to group in a way that is going to be, that will maximize your ISP number. And so we did send the data already to meals counts. And so you'll see it came back with this grouping information. You'll see here, grouping 18. So it came up with 18 different recommended groupings for this school district. Also, just some other information. This school district waived the copay. They also had, a fair amount of meal charges at some of the schools, which is not uncommon, especially in California. Almost all of their schools are under severe need breakfast. So all of these little elements play into the full financial impact. Those of you that are real numbers crunchers, with child nutrition, it's a game of pennies. So it really, each of these things play into the financial result. Also important to note, Anaheim, I believe they were really wanting to implement district-wide, and for a number of different reasons. Every district is different, so it is something that they really felt that they wanted to do implement district-wide. And so the meals count was able to achieve that for them. I was really impressed by it. And then looking at their financial results, I think it created a pretty compelling case for moving forward with that recommendation. Even very conservatively, their current revenue is just over 18 million. If they, with an expected, under scenario 1, it was showing 26 million. If you, again, maybe, I always tend to take the very, very, very conservative, side of things, even under very most conservative with the advanced analysis. I went back and I ran, even with just a 15% increase in lunch, they still would come out ahead with CEP. And again, just to reiterate what Emily said earlier, these are just numbers. This isn't taking into account the improved school culture, the no longer following up on the pain of meal charges. I think the meal charge case alone is probably a great case for, further adding to this analysis, and all the other benefits of CEP. So thank you, Anaheim, for letting us use your data. And Emily, anything that we need to add, or anything I glossed over or skipped?
I don't think so from my end. I think that was a really great overview of how the calculator works and the data that's needed and how you can use it to do all of the scenario planning for your district. So I would welcome anyone on the line who has questions. There's no question that is too too basic or too complicated to ask us. We've been working on this for a long time, and we really want to make this as useful for you all as possible. So please do send your questions. I do want to call attention quickly to meals count. It's been referenced a number of times. It is a grouping calculator for CEP. It's free, it's online. If you maybe on the line are like, we're sold on CEP, we don't need to show the financial, all these different financial models, and we just need to find our best grouping to really maximize our CEP, you could use meals count alone, which I just put the link for in the chat. So it's powered, as Zeta mentioned, by really powerful algorithms that shuffle your schools and test all of these different combinations to find the most optimized financial grouping for your district. So we call it free money because all you're doing is just shuffling the way that you're adopting CEP by shuffling your schools into really optimized groups. So there's no reason not to use meals count. But the great thing is that meals count is built right into this calculator. So Zeta worked with the creator of meals count to just be able to send your data straight to the website in the background, run the scenarios, and then spit it right back out in the calculator so that you didn't have to shift between these two different calculators and enter your data twice. So if meals count is new to you, that's the information about where that comes from and why it's built into the calculator. If you're trying to maximize your revenue under CEP, you've got to look at grouping, and meals count does it all for you. So free money. There's my plug for free money. So we're getting some questions in, and one of them was for meal debt. If you could go back to the entering data portion, do you enter it as a negative number?
Good question. Very good question. No, enter it in as just a positive number, but great question.
Yeah. And if all meal charges are staying on meal charges, unpaid school meal debt, if they're all paid off by the end of the fiscal year, do you still need to enter that info into the calculator?
If you received the revenue, then no. It's only the meal charges is what you have after you've closed the books. You did not receive the funds.
Great. And if I would think of this too, like a lot of districts will use their general fund to cover unpaid school meal debt. And so even if you get that money and that's not something that you're looking at for your school nutrition account, you might be able to go to your administrators and say, we don't have to use this thousands of dollar pool to cover unpaid school meal debt, and you can reinvest that back into rebuilding and other educational supports. So if you get it all from parents by the end of the year, then maybe it's no different. But if you're getting it from a fund that might be able to go to other educational supports, I think that's really powerful. So for the purposes of the calculator, make the best decision for you and what will help you make that determination. But don't forget, if you're trying to sell CEP to your administration, that is a huge selling point, that we don't have to take this money from the general fund anymore, or at least for the next 4 years. All right. And how many schools can you enter into this calculator, Zeta?
150.
Okay. So if your district is bigger than that, let us know, but you should be able to enter in up to 150 schools into this calculator. And this one, I think, might be a state-specific question. I'm not sure, since Fund 1 has to pay that to Fund 13 at the end. Is this California specific? Or you're getting this?
Well, since Fund 1 has to pay that to Fund 13. Yes. Okay. Yeah, because at the end of the day, if it's Fund 1 or Fund 13, it's still district money. You're not allowed to pay for meal charges out of your Fund 13, because it would basically mean that that federal money is paying for families that are full pay or paid, right? Which is not allowed. But you're right. At the end of the day, if your district is paying off those meal charges, it's still district money. So you should still count that as bad debt. You should still count that as a negative meal charge.
And we have a really great question here. How do you factor in increased costs due to increased meal volume into the financial analysis? I'll let you take that one first.
Sure. So at this time, the calculator only looks at revenue. And obviously that's one side of it. If you are going to have increases in participation or a change in programs such as BIC, you will have changes in your food, in your costs, sometimes in your labor costs. I know some districts even need to invest in additional milk coolers or things like that because of the increased participation. So that is the other side that you would need to look at and get into. At this time, the calculator only looks at revenue, but it is, you should look at the other side as well, of your costs that will go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've covered it. And this specific district has 256 schools. So in terms of the director, I'm assuming, asked about grouping, I'm gonna put my email address again in the chat. So meals count works, the website front for grouping that many schools, it just takes such a long time. And it's actually faster if you send me and the creator of Meals Count your file, and he can run it outside of the website and run it essentially for longer than the website would allow. So give you more confidence in your grouping result with that many schools. So I'm again throwing my email in the chat, and we'd be able to turn that around to you within a day, I'm sure. So with a district that size, definitely email me. If you're more than, I would say, if you're more than 150, we'll run it outside of, still through Meals Count, but just off of the website front. This is a great question. If I do not want Meals Count to consider a particular school because it has a very low ISP, for example, should I remove that school in step 4? And is there any standard wisdom about what ISP cutoff we should use? Or does it vary so much by district that there's not a good rule of thumb? This is a fabulous set of questions here. I'll let you set a demo first, how to remove or include a school and rerun the analysis.
Okay, so yes, there are times when you may know upfront that you don't want to include a school, or for example, I guess I would encourage you to run it completely just to see what Meals Count comes back with, because you'd be surprised. I certainly have been surprised how great a job they do at grouping and being able to bring a lot of schools into a group and make it viable. But if you run it and then, for example, you say, I'm still really not happy and I don't like that number, or there's an anecdotal reason why you don't want that, you can clear this data here and take this out and say remove, and then run it again. And it will come back. Again, sorry, it takes a little bit of time. It'll come back with the grouping, and you'll see here that says eligible for CEP, no. So you've basically kind of overridden it and said, no, I don't want to include it. And so you'll see in the results the analysis does not apply to that school. It's taking it out.
Yeah, I think if I were doing this, I'd probably do a first pass and include every school possible, whether that's all schools in your districts. I think even in the Anaheim example, we have some really low ISPs that can be grouped in and thus be brought on to CEP, even though they're not individually at that 40% threshold. So that's the other piece. It's not only financial optimization, but can you get more schools that are not at that eligibility 40% ISP threshold themselves onto CEP? So I would do that and look at my district level results. And if I'm like, whoa, we're losing way too much money by doing it this way, then I would start going back and kind of iterating on that and maybe removing a couple of those low ISP schools. Remember to rerun the grouping and then keep doing that until you find something that works best for your goals. And as you and Zeta mentioned, there's no good rule of thumb. It just depends more, like this district is, we want to bring everyone onto CEP, so they want to bring those low ISP schools on. But some districts might not be doing well financially and really are just trying to be as conservative as possible and test CEP this year and then bring on more schools down the line. Then maybe you don't want to bring on those lower ISP schools this time around. So it does depend on what your goals are. And luckily this tool can help you kind of move through that process multiple times in a pretty easy way. All right, I see one more question. So if you guys on the line still have more questions or suggestions, even for improvement or feedback, or please do send those in either the Q&A portion or the chat portion. And if you would like to or ask a question aloud, you can raise your hand, use the raise my hand feature, and I can allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question aloud. So I'll notice if you raise your hand and I'll announce your name and let you do that. So this is going back to the unpaid meal charges. The question was, if the general fund pays for the unpaid school meal charges, do you not include it in the CEP calculator?
Sorry, what was the question again?
If your general fund pays for the unpaid school meal charges, do you not include then the unpaid school meal figures, debt figures in the calculator?
You should include it. You should include it. Because even though your Fund 13, and Fund 13 is the Child Nutrition Fund, the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Fund, even though it gets from another department or another fund within your district, you're still incurring that cost. You're still losing that money. So you should definitely still include it.
And would this calculator work if you're transitioning from Provision 2, P2 to CEP?
Yes. Yes. So if you're on CEP or on Provision 2, you can, for your paid meal collection, you would just enter in a 0 because you're not collecting any. You're serving meals at no charge, basically. The only difference is that you're not collecting a paid meal price, and you're submitting your claim based off of a percentage your base year. I think with Provision 2, where it starts to, you have to look through it with a particular lens, in that your participation rates may not see that much of a significant increase, because from a student perspective, they're getting the meals for free already. The difference is in how you're claiming. Does that make sense, Emily? Okay.
I think so, yeah. We had another question about Hawaii and Alaska. Because they have different meal reimbursement rates, does this calculator still work for them?
Hawaii and Alaska, the federal rate. You know what? I don't think we did. We do, the
Well,
calculator does take into account all of the state reimbursements and the nuances across the states. We definitely did that, and that goes into account. But I don't believe that we did the difference for the federal reimbursement rate.
So I'm sure we'll fix that and have it up by the end of the week to have Alaska and Hawaii in. We've had some testers use it, but not from Alaska and Hawaii. So really appreciate you bringing that up. And I guess this does lend itself to, if your state provides supplemental funding, like an extra 10 cents per breakfast served, if you're, if 40% of the kids of the meals that you serve are to free and reduced price kids, and your state then gives you an extra 10 cents, we have all of those rules factored in, and you can see the state data inputs, but we somehow overlooked the different federal reimbursement rates for Hawaii and Alaska. So we will add those in and send around an updated link to it'll be the same link, but we'll let you know that change has occurred.
Thank you. That was a great catch.
Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback?
So yeah, just these three tabs here are the results tab. The advanced analysis is where you can go in and edit these percentages and play around with it if you want, but we have pre-loaded it already for you on with the different scenarios to see the impact by school and then totaled by district.
Can you explain the grouping column numbers that come after the calculation?
Yes.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So the grouping numbers are listed on there because we wanted to show how it makes an impact if a school is grouped. Because if you have a school with very high ISP over 64, I think 64%, anything above that, you can't get more than 100% reduced or 100% free claiming meals, right? So it's important for any school that has more than 64% ISP low income students, you want to couple that with a school that has less, because it will raise the the multiplier, the 1.6 multiplier, and basically get you more reimbursement. You'll be able to claim more meals under the free category. And so we really wanted to make sure that we had this data referenced, so that when you're looking at the numbers, just to see, perhaps what schools it was grouped with, just to help add some further color to the analysis.
Great. And I think you mentioned I'm typing answers in the question and answer box at the same time, but if it's all ones, they're all together. All twos, that's the grouping. All threes, they're grouped together. So it's not like this is the best scenario. It's essentially naming the group one, naming the next group two.
Yes.
Another question, and we will definitely add this in to when we add Alaska and Hawaii. I think would you go to the federal data input tab? We will also make sure that we have Puerto Rico, Guam, because that goes with the Hawaii reimbursement rate. So we will add that in and have that done probably by the end of the week to be used in Hawaii, Alaska, and Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So thank you again all we certainly didn't mean to forget any of those states and territories, so our apologies. And I'm so grateful for you all for joining and asking those questions and making sure that this calculator is working for everyone. So this is our first day view of it, and your feedback is so helpful and important to us.
Yes.
I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box or in the chat. I think Seta and I have some time to hang around to answer if anyone has any last ones that they haven't yet gotten to. Otherwise, I think we're ending even before time. So thank you all for joining, and would love to hear your feedback as you use the calculator. If something isn't working for you, again, I'll just throw my email address into the chat here. We're more than happy to help troubleshoot, hop on the call, work with you. If you have a giant district, again, I'll connect you with Meals Count directly so that we can run your groupings. And we'll let you know when some of these changes are made to the calculator by the end of the week. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And if there's anything we can do to support as you're going through the CEP application process, please don't hesitate to reach out, and thank you for all that you do.
Don't go it alone, for sure.
All right, well, we'll hang out here, but feel free to head off if all your questions have been answered. And I'll stop the recording. Okay, we got another question come in. Thank you, Jennifer, for your kind words. Okay, so on the calculator on tab 5B, there isn't a column for groups. Oh, can you go to 5B? Yes, okay. So trying to stop the recording here.